Okay, so today is the second video. And the second video is essential nutrients and digestion that we are about to watch. I should do this together.
Good morning, boys and girls. It's Miss Alarm. And it's here from hospital. So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics. We're going to talk about digestion. And digestion is how we mechanically and chemically break down food so that the food can fuel us. And I'm going to do a couple experiments to show you how this works. So my first experiment, I'm going to set it up right now because it takes about 10 minutes for this to get going. So we're going to use whole grains or bread as an example. So here I have 2 different loaves of bread.
Oh, this is the type of bread I use.
Whole-fried bread is white. Okay? And I'm going to take this piece of white bread and I'm going to put it on a dish, just like that. The dish represents our stomach, which is part of digestion, which we're going to be talking about later in this lesson. The other loaf of bread is whole wheat. And it is actually 100% whole wheat. So what that means is all flour used to make this loaf of bread is whole wheat flour. I'm going to take the other slice and I'm going to put it on a separate dish. So in our stomach, what do you think breaks down food? Well, stomach acid. Now, obviously I don't have that, but I do have orange juice, and orange juice is acidic. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pretend that this represents the stomach acid, and I'm going to pour a little bit on each slice. You know, this looks kind of gross. Good thing we're not eating this. And I'm going to let that sit, and I'm going to do the other slice of bread. And again, we're imagining these pieces of bread are in our stomach and are being digested. So we're going to leave them here and we'll get back to them. Now I'm showing you a picture of school supplies. And school supplies are important because you need them to get through school, right? You need paper,
except for this year,
pens, and maybe scissors, erasers, and they work together. If I were to give you a pencil with no paper, or if I were to give you scissors with nothing to cut, that wouldn't really make a lot of sense, right? And by the end of the school year, if you start out with just a pencil, probably by the end, it's going to be pretty small. Or if you have a container of glue, it maybe will be empty. So what do? Well, you replenish. You buy another pencil or another container of glue. I want you to think of food the same way. Healthy foods are like your school supplies. So here you see a basket of a variety of different healthy foods.
Oh, yeah.
These are things that our bodies need. They contain things called nutrients. And nutrients, maybe you've heard of vitamins and minerals. These are substances that our bodies actually need to stay healthy, to help us grow, to give us energy. So in the same way that you would replace your school supplies if they run low, you need to replace the nutrients that you get from foods every day. So there are 6 essential nutrients, meaning substances that our bodies need to get from food to give us the energy and to survive. Essential meaning we can't live without them. These 6 nutrients are carbohydrates, protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, and water. So let me break them down and just go through each one with you. So carbohydrates come mostly from plants. These that fall into this category are grains, things like bread, pasta, rice, milk, fruits, and vegetables. And carbohydrates are the body's main source of energy. So we actually need more carbohydrates than any other type of nutrient. Think of fat like a piggy bank. If you don't eat for a while or have enough carbohydrates stored up, your body can use fat for energy. It also does other things in the body, like it insulates the body, so think it keeps the body warm. It acts as a shock absorber by padding and cushioning your vital organs underneath it. And it helps transport vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins throughout your body. Protein foods come from things like meat, chicken, fish, eggs, and vegetarian proteins like beans, seeds, and nuts. I call protein the mechanic because the body actually uses protein to repair itself as opposed to actually fueling it. So carbohydrates, protein, and fat are macronutrients, meaning those are the nutrients we need in large amounts. They provide the main source of energy for our body, and calories. And don't forget, calories are a measure of energy. So what about vitamins and minerals? Where do we get them? Do we order a dish of calcium with a side of vitamin C? Do we get them from vitamin and mineral supplements? Well, these can help, but really you get them from the foods you eat. So I'm going to show you an example of how a vitamin helps your body stay healthy. So what I do is I take an apple and I cut it in half. And if you've ever done that, you'll notice that after a while, your apple will turn brown. That's because when you cut it open, you're exposing the cells to oxygen. And the oxygen actually can start to cause that damage, oxidation. So imagine if that's your cell. Do you want that happening? So what I did is I took some lemon, and lemon is vitamin C. It's an antioxidant. That's a big word, antioxidant. So it prevents this oxygen effect. And I rubbed it over the other side of the apple. What do you think that apple side looks like? That. So even though you don't see the barrier of vitamin C, it's there, and it's an invisible barrier that protected this side of the apple from the oxygen around it. So imagine that happening inside your body, how that would protect your cells. So water actually makes up about 85% of a child's body weight, and it helps us do a lot of things like maintain our body temperature. It's necessary to help our body transport nutrients through the blood to different parts of the body. It helps get rid of waste products in our body. We, in fact, as humans, can survive weeks without food, but only a few days without water. Now, foods are not necessarily categorized as either a protein or fat or a carbohydrate. They can actually be a combination. So I'm going to show you a picture of a steak, and I want you to tell me if you think it's a protein, fat, or carbohydrate, or a combination. What do you think? Well, we know it's a meat, and that's a protein. But look at that white part of the steak. That's actually fat. So if you were going to eat that, what I would do before eating it is I would just take a knife and I would trim off the fat because the animal fat is unhealthy, saturated fat. Here's a picture of nuts. What do you think? Nuts are a really good source of protein, but they're also fat. Just think, if you have nuts in your hand, they leave kind of that greasy feeling in your fingers. So they're fat as well, but they're a healthy fat because they actually come from a plant and not an animal. Here's kind of a trick question. I'm going to show you a picture of milk. Again, protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Well, think about this for a minute. We talked about essential nutrients. So imagine a baby in their first 4 months of life. What are they eating? Well, they're not really eating, right? They're drinking, and they're drinking milk, whether from the mother or formula. So because they need their essential nutrients to grow, milk actually has all three macronutrients: fat, protein, and carbohydrate. So now we're going to talk about whole grains, like that loaf of bread I showed you earlier. And don't worry, I haven't forgotten about my experiment. We're going to get to that in a moment. But I want to talk to you about why whole grains or whole wheat bread, for example, is healthier for you than white bread. And you probably know this already. I bet people have told you this throughout your lifetime. How whole wheat bread is healthy. But has anyone ever told you why? Well, I'm going to explain it to you. And I'm going to actually use a picture to do it. So if you think about a whole grain kernel of wheat, this is just a really big example of it. But a whole grain kernel, or a kernel, has three parts to it. It has the outside shell, which is the bran. It has that inside starchy part, which is kind of like if you imagine white bread, how it feels kind of soft, called the endosperm. And then it has the inside, which is the germ. That's not like a germ that makes you sick, but it's actually a germ.
Yeah,
And those three parts together
that's the flour.
make a whole grain, because the whole grain is one piece. But to make white bread, kernel goes into the factory for processing. And during the processing, these two parts go away and you're left with just the center. And that's what makes white bread. So whole grain, white bread. And the reason that white bread is not as good for you is that the two really healthy parts of the grain are taken away. So now it's up to you to decide. Here's, of course, a pretty funny picture of a whole grain, and you can see the whole grain is holding the wheat plant, just to show you that that's representing just a little kernel of that plant. And then the white kernel, you can see, has been in the factory in the background, and the bran and the germ are taken apart, and he is just left with the center, or the endosperm part of that kernel. So that's just a kind of a funny illustration of whole grain versus one that is processed, which means that two parts have been taken off. So now let's go back to our experiment. So we're gonna now get into the digestion part of this lesson, which is what I love. All right, so these are cooking very nicely. The reason for this experiment is I want to talk about how whole grains are digested in your stomach. So in other words, which one keeps you full longer? So here, imagine this. Imagine you wake up and you have a piece of bread for breakfast, and then you go to school, all right? Not a very big breakfast, but okay, let's just say, give that as an example. Which one's gonna keep you full longer? So here I have the bread in my stomach, the orange juice, which is pretending to be stomach acid, is digesting the bread. And let's see what's happening here. What you notice is that the bread is digesting pretty quickly. See how that just kind of falls right apart? Well, let's try my whole bread. Nope, still intact. Because it has all those other parts to it, it's actually much stronger, so it takes longer to digest or break apart. And what that means is you're not going to be as hungry as quickly, which is a good thing.
And the nutrients will get into your bloodstream.
Or your pasta or your rice is whole grain. So let me show you. One thing you can do is actually just look at the bag. And what's very important is that 100%. So it doesn't just say whole wheat, but the 100% tells me that all of that flour is whole wheat. Sometimes it can say whole wheat, but some of the flour is white. So these labels can be a little bit deceiving. Another way is to look at the ingredients. The first ingredient should say whole grain.
Yeah.
Right? If it just says wheat flour, then it's not whole.
Okay, I'll bring it back.
Another way to know if your food contains whole grain is look for the stamp there. But be aware that just because it has that stamp doesn't mean it's a perfectly healthy food. So, for example, maybe there's some whole grain, but there may also be a lot of sugar. So this would be the best option. So there are different types of stamp. There's your basic stamp, which means there may be like a little bit of whole grain, not a ton. There could be a stamp that says that 50% is whole grain. So that means that 50% of the flour is whole wheat and the rest is white. Or 100% whole grain. All right, and that means that all of the grain, all of the flour in there is whole grain. So take a look at those next time you go to the supermarket. Now let's talk about actual digestion and kind of get into understanding how food actually fuels us. So digestion is when your body breaks down food, and you can either do it mechanically or chemically. So for example, mechanically, let's say you're eating something. What is the very first thing that breaks down the food you're eating? Well, let's say I'm putting a piece of bread in my mouth. The first thing that breaks it into smaller pieces is my teeth. So that's the initial start of digestion. Once the food is in my mouth, you may not even realize it, but your body produces saliva, which starts to break down starches. And I'm going to give you an example, kind of a fun little experiment. It takes a little bit of time, but you can do it at home. So what you do is if you have something like a saltine, I have a small oyster cracker here. This is literally just pure starch. And what you do is you put it in your mouth and just rest it on your tongue and let it sit there until it completely dissolves. And what you're gonna notice is that initially it tastes salty, because saltines are salty. But as the minutes go by, it's gonna actually start to taste sweet. And the reason is that your saliva is breaking down starch, and starch breaks down to sugar. So try that at home if you can. Next, your tongue mashes around your food and actually pushes it back down your throat. And so the food travels down your esophagus, which is what connects your throat to your stomach. Once food is in your stomach, it breaks down further, and we know that there are digestive juices or stomach acid in there that really break down the food. So it's in very, very small pieces, and it actually starts to break apart the different nutrients, the carbohydrate, the fat, the protein, different vitamins, minerals. They start to break apart. And then from your stomach, they enter into the small intestines. So here I have a mound of rope, but it is representing 28 feet. And 28 feet is about the length of an adult intestine. So that includes your small and large intestine. And in the body, it's coiled up.
That's just the small intestine. Then you have the large.
So if you imagine a piece of your small intestine, I kind of have this here. I'm going to pretend this is just a larger example of this. Okay. So if you imagine your food going through that, okay, what happens, the food is in the inside, and this on the other side is your bloodstream. So food travels through into the bloodstream. They're nutrients. At that point, they're broken down into such small pieces that
it doesn't necessarily like go through it, like the bloodstream
carries those nutrients
like
all
bloodstream
so it reaches all your
Yes.
cells straight
Right.
into that feed all of those cells with the nutrients. And that is how
Yeah.
your body is fueled by food. Pretty amazing, right?
Oh, good. Finally. Okay. All right. So that is today's video. I hope you learned something.
I did.
So with each one of these videos, I put out a document that you're to write 5 things you learned that surprised you, anything unique that you can tell me. Okay? So I like these. Remember, she's right there at Stanford Hospital. This is the nutritionist from Stanford Hospital, and I love these videos she made for us. And this is all information you need to take into living in the real world, in my opinion. So, okay, tomorrow there will be, let's see, tomorrow's video. Come on, go back. Oh, it's about sugar. So we're going to learn some stuff about sugar.